The storm raged across the cursed moorland, lightning clawing at the sky like angry talons. Mud-slick trails turned treacherous underfoot, forcing the adventurers to seek shelter in the only structure within miles, a crumbling, abandoned manor that loomed like a forgotten god of stone and rot. Eric, the battle-hardened fighter, shoved open the creaking double doors, his sword gleaming in the flickering light of Valric's summoned flame. Maeve, ever alert, slipped inside like a shadow, her sharp eyes scanning for traps or signs of life. Ilara, the group's ever-hopeful cleric, whispered a protective prayer as the storm howled behind them, sealing them inside. The manor reeked of age and despair. Dust hung thick, clinging to ancient portraits of grim, unyielding faces. The furniture lay in disarray, draped in cobwebs, as if something had torn through in a fit of rage or hunger. "We'll rest here," Eric declared, shoving a tattered armchair against the front doors for reinforcement. "Just until the storm passes." Hours passed. A fire crackled weakly in the hearth of what might have once been a grand study. The adventurers sat in uneasy silence, sharing a meager meal from their dwindling supplies. Maeve toyed with her dagger, restless and uneasy. Then Eric found it. Half hidden beneath a collapsed bookshelf lay a weathered bag, its once fine leather now cracked and darkened with age. Strange runes stitched into its edges glowed faintly in the dim firelight. "Look what we have here," Eric said, hauling it out. "Might be worth something." Valric's expression darkened. "Careful. Old magic clings to things like that." "Nonsense," Eric smirked. "We've been needing a break." He reached inside, rummaging around. His brow furrowed. "Strange. Feels deeper than it should be." A sudden clink echoed as he drew out a tarnished silver brooch, crusted with something dark. "Treasure," he muttered, more to himself than the others. The bag shifted slightly in his grip, almost eagerly. That night, the manor was far too quiet, the storm reduced to a distant rumble. Valric, restless, stirred from his meditative trance, troubled by uneasy dreams. He rose, seeking the fire's comfort, only to find the hearth cold, its light snuffed out. "Ilara, Maeve," he whispered. Silence. His eyes adjusted, falling on something in the corner of the room. The bag slumped like a deflated corpse. Eric's greatsword lay abandoned next to it, its blade slick with something dark and wet. Valric staggered back, his heart pounding as he realized the bag was moving. Its mouth-like opening quivered, bulging outward, as though something inside was struggling or feeding. A sudden whisper echoed through the room, low and hungry. Need more." The bag lurched violently, its seams splitting as something inside pressed against the leather, trying to claw its way out. Valric stumbled backward, his breath hitching as the bag twitched like a dying animal. The air felt suffocating, thick with a coppery tang that clung to his throat. His mind reeled with half-remembered stories, legends of cursed bags that devour the careless. "Ilara, Maeve!" he hissed, voice trembling. "Eric's gone, something's wrong." Footsteps thundered down the grand staircase as Maeve appeared, blades drawn, her eyes wide with alarm. Ilara followed, clutching her holy symbol, her face pale. "What happened?" Ilara whispered. Valric pointed at the bag. Its mouth-like opening sagged open, empty, but the air around it thrummed with malevolent energy. "Eric, he's gone." After frantic debate, Ilara performed a divination ritual. Her whispered prayers echoed in the desolate manor, the flickering light of her holy symbol casting strange shadows on the walls. As she chanted, the bag twitched again, emitting a sound somewhere between a whisper and a groan. Suddenly, Ilara froze, her pupils dilating into black voids. Her voice distorted as she gasped, speaking in two overlapping tones. "He hungers. His realm grows. He sees you." Maeve yanked her back, breaking the connection. Ilara collapsed, trembling and gasping for air. "It's alive. It's a door to somewhere." Determined to understand the bag's dark nature, Valric began studying the runes lining its edges. "This bag, it doesn't just store things," he whispered grimly. "It takes them, keeps them." Maeve's eyes narrowed. "Then we burn it." "No!" Valric snapped. Destroying it might trap Eric forever, or worse, release what's inside. A tense silence fell. Finally, Maeve approached the bag cautiously, her rogue instincts battling against dread. If there's even a chance he's alive? She reached inside slowly, her fingers trembling, but she felt nothing. Just cold, endless emptiness. Suddenly, a grotesque shriek erupted from the bag as it lunged toward her hand. A sickly green light engulfed Maeve, dragging her in with a violent pull before she could scream. "No!" Ilara and Valric lunged, but it was too late. Maeve was gone. Breathing heavily, Valric fell back, shaking with rage and terror. Ilara clutched her holy symbol so tightly, her knuckles whitened. "We have to go after them," Valric said, voice cold and resolute. "There's no other way." Ilara hesitated. "You saw what it did. What if it's a trap?" "It is a trap," he growled, drawing his ritual dagger. "But it's also the only way." Before she could protest, Valric sliced his palm, letting dark blood drip onto the bag. He began muttering arcane phrases in a forgotten tongue, forcing the bag's twisted magic to accept them. The bag shuddered violently, and its dark opening stretched wide, revealing an endless, spiraling void. "We go together," Valric commanded, grabbing Ilara's hand. With a final breath, they stepped into the impossible darkness. As the void consumed them, a faint voice echoed through the cold abyss. Two voices merged into one. "Help us." It sounded like Maeve and Eric. The descent was endless. Ilara and Valric tumbled through a twisting, weightless void where time seemed to break apart like shattered glass. They landed hard on cold, stone-like ground, but the surface pulsed faintly, like living flesh beneath their feet. The air was thick with decay, tinged with something worse, fear. Strange, shifting corridors stretched into the darkness, lined with ancient, crumbling relics, rusted swords, cracked spellbooks, and forgotten keepsakes, all claimed from the bag's countless victims. Every item seemed arranged with macabre precision, like offerings in a twisted museum. "This place," Ilara whispered, her voice trembling, "it's watching us." Valric pressed forward, his dagger ready, whispering a protective incantation. "Stay close. It knows we're here." A distant sound echoed through the dark, a hollow dragging scrape, something moving. They navigated the ever-changing maze, walls shifting with a stomach-churning slither. As they pressed on, Valric's arcane senses flared, twisted conjuration magic, tangled with necromantic threads. Turning a corner, they stumbled into a horrific display, twisted humanoid figures, half melted into the walls, their faces locked in eternal screams, arms stretched out in a futile attempt to escape, their fingers broken and bloody. Ilara gagged, but Valric clenched his fists. "He's keeping them, collecting them." A broken whisper drifted through the still air. "Run!" As they pressed deeper, they came upon a massive chamber, a trophy hall. Suspended from grotesque chains were lifeless bodies, preserved like gruesome dolls. Eric's battered armor gleamed in the flickering greenish light. "Ilara," Valric whispered, pointing. There, shackled by barbed tendrils, was Maeve, or what was left of her. Her head snapped toward them, and her mouth twisted into a grotesque smile, too wide, stretching far past what should have been possible. "You came home." Her voice, two voices overlapping, hers and Eric's. Before they could react, the shadows twisted and unfurled, revealing him. The bagman emerged, towering and grotesque, his body stitched together from countless stolen limbs, his face obscured by a dark hood, his impossibly long arms dragged behind him, clawed fingers scraping the ground with that dreadful hollow sound. "You are mine." His voice was a chorus of the lost, endless, and cold. Valric roared in defiance, casting a desperate banishment spell, but the bagman simply laughed, his presence far too deeply entwined with this dark realm. Ilara called upon her goddess, unleashing a burst of holy light that seared the air, forcing the bagman to recoil, but only for a moment. "We can't fight him," Ilara cried. "We have to escape." "No." Valric's voice was distant, his eyes locked on the twisted heart of the realm. A throne made of stolen relics, thrumming with arcane power. We end this, or no one ever leaves. With grim determination, Valric plunged his dagger into his own hand, using blood magic to weave a desperate sealing ritual. His life force fueled the spell as reality itself buckled around them. Ilara's eyes widened in horror. "You're sacrificing—" "Go!" Valric bellowed, his voice ragged. "The spell needs someone to stay behind, to hold the gate." Ilara staggered back, torn between saving him or obeying his last command. The ground split beneath her as the world fractured, collapsing inward. With a final desperate cry, Ilara cast Word of Recall, vanishing in a blinding surge of divine light, leaving Valric behind. As the spell tore the bagman's realm apart, Valric collapsed, gasping. But it wasn't over. A chilling silence fell. From the collapsing darkness, long, twisted fingers emerged, his own stretching from inside the bag. His reflection stared back from within its cursed depths, twisted and grinning. "You never leave." Thank you for joining us on this dark and twisted journey through the legend of the Bagman. If you enjoyed the story and want more tales from the world of Dungeons & Dragons, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel.